This whole ordeal started back in 1991 when my father handed me the deed to the land along with a padlock he'd bought that same year. That padlock sat in the drawer of the ranch office for 22 years, just waiting for the right moment. And in November, I finally needed it. Early on a Monday morning in December, I drove to the western gate with two things: a closure notice that my attorney prepared, and that padlock. I posted the notice on the gate, 2 pages, with attachments like the certified boundary survey chain of title analysis and a 1991 road deed that proved I owned the road lock, stock, and barrel. Then I threaded the chain through the gate, snapped the lock shut, and went back to feed the cattle. I didn't expect anything to happen immediately, but by 4:47 p.m. the first car arrived. The driver read the notice, sat there for a while, and then reversed. By 5:30 p.m., my neighbor, Walt Puett, a 35-year civil engineer, had counted 27 vehicles backed up on the approach road. Drivers were standing out in the cold reading the deed attached to the gate. It didn't take long for them to figure out the road they'd been driving on for 22 years didn't belong to them after all. 6 weeks earlier, the Pinnacle Ridge HOA had fenced and padlocked that same road, putting up a sign that said, "Pinnacle Ridge HOA Community Perimeter, Authorized Access Only." The problem: the road had been in my family since my father graded it by hand in 1978. The county's deed office recorded it in 1979. I'd inherited it in 1991, and it had been part of the public record ever since, with no easements, no encumbrances, and certainly no permission from anyone else to lock it up. The HOA had never bothered to check the deed. My attorney told me in September, "Document everything. Don't say a word." And I didn't. I already knew where that padlock was. But let me back up a bit and tell you how it all unfolded. Cord Baxter, that's me, had been driving the western perimeter road of my ranch every morning for 34 years. Not out of routine, more like the kind of attention a rancher pays to the land. You learn that problems are smaller when you find them early, and in my line of work, early detection is key. So every morning at 6:52 a.m., I drive the road, coffee and the cup holder radio off, just checking things, watching the fences, the cattle, the sunrise over the eastern plateau, where Pinnacle Ridge sits with its rows of identical roofs and manicured lawns. This road had been part of my family since my father built it back in 1978, and it had never been an issue until now. It connected my ranch to the county highway, and I had no reason to think anyone would ever question it. But I've seen development creep closer over the years. 22 years ago, they graded the land above my property and started building homes. Then one day in September, I saw a new fence. It wasn't just any fence. 6 strands of barbed wire running the full length of my southern boundary. I watched a contractor working from across the pasture for 3 days, but I didn't think much of it at first. When it was done, I drove up to check it out. It wasn't along the HOA's property line, it was on my land. They'd fenced in a strip of my grazing land without so much as a "by your leave." They didn't ask for my input. They didn't offer to negotiate or even let me know what they were doing. They just did it. I had no choice but to call my attorney, Meredith Kane, who immediately started pulling the paperwork and taking photographs. She read the file, documented everything, and told me not to contact anyone at the HOA yet. This wasn't something to handle in haste. We needed to build a case. But things were about to get a whole lot worse. Then just weeks later, another fence appeared, this time blocking the road that had been part of my family's property since 1978. The fence was placed directly across it. No notice, no request, no explanation. It wasn't a boundary issue anymore. They were trying to take control of the only road that connected my ranch to the highway. I called Meredith. She said, "They've fenced the road," I confirmed. She asked if I had photographs. I told her I had plenty. This was serious now. The first fence was trespassing on my grazing land, but this new fence was a full-on claim of ownership over my private road. Meredith told me to stay calm, document everything, and do nothing until she said so. She said the timeline had shifted and this was now a much bigger deal. I took out my camera, photographed the gate, the padlock, the laminated tag, and the concrete posts. I noted the time in my ranch logbook, something my father had taught me to do every morning. It was never just a habit. It was a legal document, a record of everything that happened on the ranch, and it was about to be crucial. Meredith's instructions were clear: don't touch the fence, don't speak to the HOA, and don't engage until the documentation was complete. We were preparing for a legal fight. This wasn't just about land anymore, this was about control. I photographed everything, the padlock, the fence, the concrete posts. I documented it all meticulously. Meredith was already building our case, and now it was my turn to wait. By the time I finished documenting the fence, Meredith had the certified survey in hand. Her team, led by Philip Oakes, was working on the boundary measurements. The whole situation was turning into something bigger than I ever expected. As the days went by, I watched the fence stand there, a visible marker of the HOA's aggressive stance. And I knew sooner or later they would be getting the closure notice. The closure notice went up that morning in December. It wasn't just any notice, it was the end of the road for Pinnacle Ridge HOA. I had it professionally prepared, signed and sealed. I took my father's padlock, the one that had been sitting in the drawer for all these years, and locked that gate tight. I didn't expect anything to change immediately, but I knew it was going to. The first car arrived by 4:47 p.m. By 5:30 p.m., 27 cars were backed up, drivers standing outside reading the notice and talking in hushed tones. They were reading a legal document they didn't understand. The road they had been driving on for years was no longer theirs. It was a stunning realization, and it hit them all at once. Walt called me at 6:15 p.m., telling me the cars were backing up. I noted the time in my logbook. Tomorrow would likely be worse. By the next day it was. The parking lot was full, the line growing longer, the confusion palpable. People were talking. The HOA hadn't prepared them for this. Meredith had everything documented, and now it was all coming together. The trespass case was stronger than ever. It was clear the HOA had no right to the road, no legal standing, no recorded easement. They had to act fast, and Meredith was ready to strike. As the clock ticked down, it became clear this was no longer just a legal matter. It was a matter of principle. I was about to teach the HOA a lesson they would never forget. The road would remain closed, and the lawsuit would be filed. They were going to learn the hard way that not all battles are won with paperwork. Some you win with patience.